Welcome to the Passivhaus podcast, brought to you by Passivhaus Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passivhaus, check out passivhausaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered, and contribute to the community forum. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passivhaus journey. We hope to see you at one of our construction tech or weekly global Passivhaus showcase webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passivhaus podcast. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Passivhaus podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from Auckland in New Zealand. And we've got Zach. How are you doing, Zach?
I'm well. How are you, Matthew?
Very good. And we're welcoming back for another great round of interviews for 2022. Ilka and Mary, how are both of you? Let's start with you, Ilka. How are you doing?
I'm pretty well. It's very cold these days in Philadelphia.
Cold and wet, or just cold?
It's just cold.
We are in the middle of a pretty dry, hot summer, but potentially getting some impact from a cyclone that's bearing down on the Pacific Islands, which might give us a little bit of a rain. Some heavy rain and some big winds next week. How are things for you, Mary?
Things are great for the moment here. We finally, in the last month, have had a lot of rain, and that's wonderful. And now we're having, bizarrely slightly warmer than usual temperatures, and it feels like spring already is happening, which is a little strange, but pleasant.
Awesome. Well, we're welcoming you back as you welcome back another inspiring leader in the Passivhaus industry. So excited to get into that. But before we do, let's thank the sponsors and supporters of the show.
Absolutely. So the Accelerator's founding sponsors are 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxt Inqui Architects, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minutair all-in-one HVAC and dehumidification units, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Our champion sponsors are Icon Windows and Doors, Prosoco, and SIGA, and our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. So a big thank you to our sponsors.
Awesome. And thank you all to our listeners as well. It's great to have you as part of the show. Don't forget, we do really appreciate any support you can give to the show. Let other people know about it. Give us a rating or review wherever you are listening to this. All helps spread the word. Now, this week's guest, Mary, who have we got?
Well, we have Anne Vogt. She's a Passivhaus leader in Spain. She co-founded VAND Arquitectura, her company, and they only work on Passivhaus projects. And she also co-founded Formación Passivhaus, which does trainings, designer and tradesperson courses, an amazing number of 3,000 professionals she's trained since 2014. She also does certification, and she's just very involved in Passivhaus in Spain.
Awesome, and globally, a bit of becoming a bit of a leader as well. So let's get into it, and we'll chat again after this great interview.
Welcome, Anne Vogt. You're principal with VAND Arquitectura in Madrid, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And I understand you started working on your first Passivhaus project quite a while ago in 2007. Where was that project and what kind of building was it?
In 2007, my interest in Passivhaus was growing, and the first real project I designed together with a Turkish friend of mine was a residential building with several flats and an office and a small shop at the ground floor. So it was a very interesting building. Afterwards, I understood that it's easier a bigger project than a small single-family house, which is always more difficult. But at that time, I didn't know it. And it was in Germany, in the northern part of Germany, near Hanover, in Lehrte.
And but your relationship with Passivhaus, it wasn't that at first, the first time you heard about it, you were immediately drawn to it. I understand. But can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, actually, it wasn't love at first sight. My first contact with Passivhaus was in 1999, in the last century, when I visited a construction site of a single-family house, and I found it very technical, the ventilation system and everything. And I was much more interested in the barefoot architect and bioclimatic architecture in general. And I didn't recognize at that time that Passivhaus is, in reality, for me, it's a bioclimatic architecture, but like the the maximum expression of bioclimatic architecture. But in the beginning, it was a little bit, I found it much too technical with the air tightness, the ventilation system. I didn't understand it at the beginning.
And could you explain a little bit more about bioclimatic architecture, what that is?
Well, bioclimatic architecture is a design. The approach of the design is based on the analysis of the climate. So you first have a look at how the climate is, the winds and everything, and afterwards the design follows these conclusions. So, but there's no definition. So if you design a house with cross ventilation at night, you can say it's bioclimatic architecture. So I like it very much, and we use it to begin a Passivhaus, the design of a Passivhaus, but it's not the final goal for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's the beginning.
Yeah. So, and then you went on to actually form or found the Passivhaus group in Spain, right? How did that happen?
Yes, the first Passivhaus association in Spain is Plataforma de Edificación Passivhaus, which is PEP. I'm not a founder member. It was founded in 2008. I am one of the first members. So, in my opinion, PEP was a big step to be able to begin to start to politicians, but it was a huge amount of work. In the beginning, it was really, really a lot of work. So sometimes we didn't have time to do our projects because we were always working in PEP. So.
But eventually you've started VAND Arquitectura, right? And when was that, and how many people are in the firm now?
Yes, in 2010, I met first my colleague Nuria Diaz. She's an architect too, and we organized with 3 colleagues the Passivhaus conference of PEP in 2011 in central Spain. So afterwards, we began to work together. And in 2013, we founded VAND Arquitectura, and since then we are working together. At the moment, we are 5 architects working at VAND, and 2 of them began to work with us more than 6 years ago. In May, they will be 7 years, so quite a long time. And we only do Passivhaus projects at VAND, mostly residential buildings, but also some office buildings or industrial use, like an olive mill we did some years ago.
I definitely would like to know a little bit more about the olive oil mill. But first, kind of in general, do you do more retrofits or more new construction? And all of your projects are located in Spain, right?
We do much more new construction, much more new build, not because of our interest. We are very interested in retrofit, but because there are much more projects for new build. We work mostly in Spain. Also, we did some project in Germany too, for the family or for people who know us from Germany. But mainly we work in Spain.
And is that all over Spain? Do you work or more in the north or?
Well, we work all over Spain. We travel a lot. So some time ago, it was difficult only to work in central Spain because there was not such a big amount of projects in central Spain. So we work in the north and the south and the east, wherever we find projects, but mainly in the central part of Spain, in Madrid and in the close to Madrid.
But the climates vary in Spain quite a bit, from southern Spain up to northern Spain. So,
yes,
is this a challenge to deal with the different climates in your project designs?
Yes, that's of course it's much easier to do a passive house in the south. If you only think of the heating systems and heating strategies, it's much more challenging in the coast. In the coast, it's quite more difficult because it's humid and hot, or warm temperate and humid. So that's really challenging. But in the north or in the central Spain, it's not so much a difference. And in the southern part of Spain, you have to think more about strategies for summer than for winter. But as we always do a bioclimatic analysis of the situation of a building, so that's not a problem for us.
So what are your strategies to avoid overheating? Because that's definitely something that we have to deal with in our climate here as well.
Well, the most important thing is shading. Fixed shading, if it's in the south, in horizontal, in the east and the west, it may be a vertical shading, and temporal shading too. So the shading, I think, if you say passive house standard has 5 main points, in Spain it's 6, because the shading is really important. And normally we do the passive houses with the air condition, because except in the northern part of Spain, you really need it, because we have some very hot weeks, so you need some air condition. But it's much more comfortable, a passive house in comparison with a normal house.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that most of your work is new construction. Is there a reason why there's not a lot of retrofits that you're hired to do?
Mm-hmm. I think people are more interested in buying or having a new build house. They don't want a retrofitted house, because it's somehow more difficult. You don't know exactly what you will get, what you will find in the process. So I think this is the main reason we work mostly in new build, because people are more interested to have a new house, not a retrofitted one.
Mm-hmm. And then how about the olive oil mill? What were the challenges there, or what's different about that building?
Well, the olive oil mill is perfect for being a passive house, because you use it mainly in winter. So you use it from October, November to January, February. So it's always the heating period. It's very important to insulate well the building. So a passive house envelope was the best. The most challenging part was the air tightness, because this was in 2008. And we didn't have any distributors or people working with air tightness materials at that time, and all the machines. Since then it was PHPP 2007, so it was not that easy to fill in all the demands of all the machines. So I think this was the most challenging part. And on the construction side, to build it. Mm-hmm. But the design is very easy. So regarding the installation, it was quite easy, but for the airtightness, it was challenging.
Well, you went on to actually educate a tradesperson to how to build passive houses, right? Was that kind of a factor, or did you start the education after this project, or was that before you started the project?
No, obviously we noticed in our first projects that no one can build them, the designs we do. So that's why we began with the tradesperson courses in 2013. The same year we founded VAND Arquitectura. We also founded Formación Passivhaus, which is the company, with our colleague Luis Antonio, to train people. We do mostly Passivhaus tradesperson courses, but also a Passivhaus designer and special courses for marketing or for retrofit or hot climates or humid climates, depending on where we do these courses. But the main idea was of Nuria and my idea to have people trained and to have construction companies able to build passive houses.
And how many people have you have gone through your courses, would you say?
Well, up to now, about 3,000 people were trained from our team since 2013.
Well, congratulations. That's a lot of tradespeople and designers also going through those courses. And how have you been able to find enough people to get interested in taking your courses? Because that's quite a challenge here in the US.
Yes, I think it's a little bit a snowball effect, because we know it. We see it a lot when there's a big project, which will be, well, first it was single family houses. When there was a single family house where the construction company wanted to train one person, then if, for example, the technical architect, and there were more people involved. And if there's a bigger project, even more people. So it's like a little snowball effects. And we notice a lot that, for example, where most passive houses are built, there's more interest in the trainings. For example, in Pamplona, there is a lot of interest because there's a politic decision to only do passive houses and hundreds of flats to rent. So that's where people want to do these courses.
So the city has set up a policy where all the apartments have to be built to passive house there?
All their apartments, yes. Not I think the plan is for 1,800 flats. I'm not sure about the number. And they want to change all these buildings to passive houses. They have some new build projects, but they have a lot of retrofit buildings too.
Oh, that's exciting. So they're doing retrofits there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, some of the case studies we have in Outfit are from this company, which is a public company of Pamplona.
So what is Outfit?
Outfit is a European project. We did some years ago a similar European project, which was called Eurofit. Eurofit was a very interesting approach to do step-by-step retrofits with the final goal of passive house, NFIT standard. So this was some years ago. In this case, Nuria and I did it like representatives of PEP, of Plataforma de Edificación Passivhaus. And now we are currently working on Outfit, which is a European project, which is about retrofitting with passive house standard, but industrialized. So we want to do very quick, fast retrofits with the final goal of EnerFit or passive house buildings.
And that's actually not only happening in Spain, right? You're looking at other countries as well.
Yes, we have VAND is the case, is the leader of the project of the case studies, of the work package of case studies. And we have cases in Germany, in Greece, in France, in Spain, in the Netherlands. So it's really interesting to see the challenges in each country. The most difficult thing is that in Greece and in Spain, we don't have a lot of experience in the market right now. There's no companies which work with this approach up to now.
And is industrialized approach means you're working, or each country or projects working on off-site fabricated panels, basically, that get attached from the outside without disturbing the occupant of the places, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly. You prefabricate everything, well, nearly everything, and you just have to go inside the buildings, which are normally occupied, to change the ventilation system. Although we are even studying to do the ventilation system from outside, to have the ducts from the outside. So sometimes this is possible too. So the idea is that these residential buildings can be occupied all the time and to disturb very, very little to the tenants or the owners.
And how do you, if you have the ventilation installed from the outside, how do you insulate the tubes?
For example, in Austria, I forgot Austria, we have very interesting projects from Austria. There, the insulation thickness has to be very, very big. So it's like a thermal bridge in the outer insulation.
And just roughly, how many case studies are you doing throughout outfit altogether?
Well, we were considering about 30 case studies. I think right now we are like in 15 case studies.
That's very exciting. And how long does the funding for this project continue for? When is it?
Well, we began last year and we have 2 more years. So the idea is to have a monitoring the first year without any retrofit steps done, then to do the retrofit, and in the last year to have the monitoring of the retrofitted buildings. So one of the projects is in the north of Spain, in Teruel, which is a very, very cold climate for Spain. And it's interesting because we are monitoring one EnerFit project we certified some years ago, which is already certified and functioning, and the one we will retrofit now with the industrialized approach. And we just had a look with my colleague, I don't know, yesterday or today, on the data of the monitoring, and the not retrofitted building doesn't achieve 18 degrees because we are talking about social housing. So it's not people who will have a lot of money to spend in the heating. If they don't have money, they don't heat. They live in fuel poverty. So, and the building we already retrofitted, it's the same type of family who's living there. They are always in 20 degrees. So it's really interesting.
That's wonderful to be able to know that you're providing such comfort for these families. It's it's such a big difference to be able to function in a warmer house than to be freezing all the time inside.
Yes, in Pamplona we had the case up to May, they didn't reach 20 degrees. I think in all the springtime, they were with very low temperatures on the inside.
So the case studies that are not working out too well in Greece, for example, is there anything that you can do about that? Like go and educate the people, or do you just kind of sit back and watch it unfold?
We are trying to talk to the industry, to different companies which want to go this way, and we are trying to convince them to do it at most industrialized as possible. Mm-hmm. So we do theoretic comparisons, and we hopefully will get companies who could do this, because we do the certification of facade systems too, of construction systems. So we have several companies which are interested, but there's no experience, neither in Greece nor in Spain. In new build, there are experiences, but retrofit is not so interesting for these companies. It's difficult, but I think it's very challenging, and I think it's a very nice European project we are working on.
Yeah, no, it sounds really, really amazing. And you actually do all the certification work as well, right? As a consultant, yes, but also as the certification entity at the end.
Yes, my colleague Nuria Diaz and me, we are Passivhaus certifiers. So we certify buildings, new build and retrofit, mostly in Spain. Also, we have some projects all around the world, but mostly in Spain or perhaps in Germany. And we do the certification of facade systems or construction systems too.
Yeah, that's really amazing.
Yeah, for facade systems for retrofits. So they have to be lighter than facade systems for new builds. They don't include the structural elements. In what kind of insulation generally is in these kinds of facade systems?
Well, it's all kind of insulation. The EPS is a very used insulation, or wool insulation too. It's different. It depends. Mineral wool is very used too, but you have to protect it very well from the outside. But it has to be a very light structure.
Because the majority of buildings that you're applying the facade systems to in these retrofits, they're masonry buildings?
Yes. They are all masonry buildings. I think all of them, yes.
So how do you go about the air sealing in these buildings?
In the middle, which is not the best. But in retrofit, you often do the air tightness on the outside of the old masonry building, and then the insulation. So it's at the warm side, but you have to, with the fixing, you have to perforate all the air tightness area. But if you don't, air tightness layer, but if you don't want to work from the inside, it's the only possibility.
Mm-hmm. And do you use membranes or some kind of liquid applied fluid?
Well, it depends on the system. Mm-hmm. The industrialized approach with membranes is much faster.
Yeah. So and then that is part of the panel. And if you went liquid applied, it would be part of the building, and then you apply a panel that is not necessarily airtight.
Well, on the panel with liquid may be possible too, but...
Mm-hmm. And so 2022 is when you're planning to have most of them, the actual retrofits happen, and then 2023 you'll be monitoring them. Is that right? So that's a lot of work you have coming up.
Yes, it's a lot of work. We are coordinating this work package of case studies, and it's difficult because every project has its own rhythm. So, and now for coronavirus, some projects stopped and changed. We changed a lot of the case studies. So it's not easy. And our projects all depend on politicians. So it's not easy, but hopefully we get results the last winter and the last summer, because for us the monitoring data in summer is even more interesting than in winter.
Mm-hmm. And has the pandemic in general affected your work in some way?
Yes, the pandemic had in general a huge impact in Spain. In Spain as a country, some of the projects went much faster, some slower, some stopped. And we had a lockdown of several weeks in the 1st March, nearly 2 years ago. And we did much more certification work because many architects were at home or at the office, but alone, without construction sites. So they could go on with the work for the certifications. Just in these, I don't know if it was like 7 weeks, the lockdown, we certified 211 buildings.
Wow.
Flats. So it was really a lot of work.
And were the majority of these single family?
Single family and residential buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And do you see it's as the climate is warming in Spain and elsewhere, have you seen your Passivhaus strategies have to shift or at all, or is this, or it's just you're applying the principles anyway and it's all working, or have you seen any change?
Well, I think it's not so much the climate change. We don't, in these 10 years, we didn't really notice this climate change because we have some hotter weeks, but we mainly have changes in winter. We have very, very cold weeks right now. We had a very cold week last January, which was very interesting because it was very cold, like minus 10 degrees Celsius in Madrid, which is really, really cold for us, or 15, but we had sun. So all the Passivhaus owners told us that they didn't need any heating because there was so much sun. They didn't need anything. So this was very, very funny. And in summer, we always had very hot weeks. So it's not, we don't see any changes right now for the climate change, but we see some changes in the user behavior because I think the comfort acceptance is changing a bit. People don't accept very hot temperatures right now in the buildings. Some years ago, no one complained about summer comfort in the buildings, and now they do. I think this is changing a bit. So people want to have cooler temperatures in summer, and this is really changing. And we never had complaints in any Passivhaus in winter, but in summer, the first summer, we have some complaints because people think it's a very airtight envelope. They cannot open the windows, never. And in summer you can. In summer you should do night ventilation if you're in a single family house in the countryside. You should open the windows. So people have to. In winter it's very easy to use a Passivhaus, but in summer you need to learn a bit about how to use the shading, when to use some air condition, when to do night ventilation. During the day, the ventilation. In summer, it's not so easy than in winter.
So you have to train them a little bit, the occupants.
Yes. Well, with if you talk to them some by phone or do another visit, it's very easier. In the second summer, we don't have complaints, but in the first summer, it's a little bit different.
So you had mentioned before that the occupants' expectations are different in the north than they are in the south. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Totally, because the maximum temperature at Passivhaus is 25 degrees, as you know, and in the south, on the east, in the Mediterranean coast, it's no problem. People think that 25, even 26 degrees are okay. But in the north, people with 23 degrees are already complaining. So well, it's always the same. You certify the kilowatt hours for some temperatures, 20 and 25 degrees. And afterwards, if you want to be at 21 or 22 in winter and 23 in summer, well, the consumption is different. But you always have to think that the active system has to be able to bring comfort to the users. That's obvious. That's always the same. You can now design a system which is only able for 20 degrees in winter and 25 in summer. If you don't have a very bioclimatic family, which is using properly all the strategies of the building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for places like Mallorca that have pretty comfortable temperatures a lot of the time, but they're humid. I understand you've been designing passive houses there also. And it's just a little surprising to me here in California. I feel like passive house is such a hard sell in the areas where our climate is easy. But that hasn't stopped you. So how do you go about convincing people to do passive house in some places like Mallorca where the climate is pretty easy? What do you think?
The climate is pretty easy, but the buildings in the south or in the Mediterranean area in general are not designed thinking of summer. They are mostly designed thinking of winter. So if you are in Mallorca in a normal, typical conventional building, it's very cold because Mallorca has some very cold weeks too. So if you really want to stay there in winter, you need a comfortable building. So well, I don't know how we convince. I think it's always like this snowball effect I mentioned. When there's one project with good results, more projects are rising because the clients ask the architect says, yes, of course, we do passive houses. Then they do a passive house course, and then they begin to do more projects. And I always say that I don't want to convince anyone. I'm just teaching what we do. And anyone has to be convinced by himself or herself, because otherwise there's no effect. No, I cannot convince anyone. Everyone has to convince himself or herself.
Yeah. So that leads me to a question where, it's obvious that you're wearing many different hats, right? You are a designer, you're an architect, you are an educator, you are a certifier, and you are a consultant. So what's your favorite hat to wear?
Well, my favorite hat, I don't know. It depends. As an architect, I love my projects we do, but we don't have so big projects. So in this case, to work on very interesting projects, it's much more interesting to be a certifier. So I'm not sure, because sometimes I don't know what hat I'm wearing, because if I go to a construction site, I have to teach too, and I think it's interesting to know everything of passive houses. I don't know how someone could be a passive house certifier without knowing about teaching or not knowing about the problems an architect has. So we are very happy to have several legs and several heads. So this is very interesting.
Yeah, that's great. Very, very impressive.
Yeah, I wonder how you have time for it all.
Yeah.
Well, we
work a lot.
You were saying earlier that you've taught 3,000 people or around 3,000 people, and are a lot of them young people, or are they mostly people well established in their career already, or what would you say?
Hmm. That's interesting because I always thought that the young people would be the most interested in Passivhaus principles. We worked at 5 universities too. Now we stopped due to the recent situation. We don't work in several masters, but interestingly, the young people are not so aware about what Passivhaus brings to the construction sector. So mostly people who do these courses are well established, mid-50s, I think, with a lot of experience at work at the construction site. So, and it's much more interesting to see how one of these persons get convinced during the course, because it's like a little crisis for them, because they recognize that they didn't well in the last years, and that it's much easier to do it well following 5 or 6 principles. So it's like a personal crisis. Lots of our students have in a course of 3 days or 10 days. And afterwards, they are really, really convinced, and they don't want to go back to do how they worked before. So this effect of personal crisis, we don't see it for young people. We see it much more for older people with a lot of experience.
It's so interesting because you would think that younger people would be more concerned about climate and therefore building well to create very energy efficient buildings. But I guess for them, it's still so theoretical, and people working in the careers longer, they see the effect of what they've done, and they see, oh yeah, I'm going to do it so much better now.
Sometimes they tell us we cannot go back to our construction sites. We only see thermal bridges now. Yeah. And young people, from our opinion, they are interested in climate change and doing things better, but they are not really interested in calculating it and in training. It's strange, but I think they didn't recognize yet the need to act in a different manner.
So how's your experience as a woman teaching these 50-year-old construction, mostly male workers?
Well, we didn't have any problems in this for gender reasons. I think a lot of people are used that at school the teachers are women too. So for teaching, I think it's not a problem. And in Spain, there are a lot of women which are architects too. So we didn't have any gender problems, neither teaching or as an architect or up to now, we didn't.
That's great to hear.
Well, that's a bright note to end on. That's great. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great talking with you. And I really look forward to the outfit process and hearing more about it as it develops. That's a very exciting project.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you a lot for the invitation.
And that was Anne Vogt. Great interview. Thank you, Ilka and Mary, as always. Ilka, let's start with you. What were the main takeaways for you?
Well, for me, in the beginning, it was just very interesting to hear about her take on bioclimatic design. That was actually something that she was drawn to at first, and then realized that would go very well hand in hand with Passivhaus, and that it's something that should be common sense to us, right? To always have the climate in mind when we design. It was just nice to hear that it supports Passivhaus as much as it does.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. I always I'm a little bit cautious about common sense, because I often think that it's that saying that it's not all that common, and sometimes things that seem obvious and seem like a really good idea, like designing for a climate, somewhere along the lines we lose track of that, and we have some amazing examples here of A-frame houses built in Auckland, which are kind of ridiculous, because one of the purposes of an A-frame house is to offload snow, and and we have lots of Mediterranean houses here as well, which is also ridiculous because we do get a lot of rain, and a flat roof with lots and lots of thermal mass is not necessarily a good idea in certain places. So we do lose track of that common sense, and there's a lot to be said for getting back to those principles of designing for the climate. And like you say, passive house lends itself to that. They're not exclusive. They do go hand in hand. What about for you, Mary?
Well, I always love talking about different climates and how do you adapt passive house to different climates. And Spain has quite a variety of climates, from northern Spain, where it can be quite cold, to southern Spain, where it's very hot a lot of the time. So it was interesting how well versed she was and comfortable with applying passive house principles in these different climates in Spain and in other countries as well. And her emphasis on shading in the southern climates was an important reminder for all of us that.
Yes. Yeah. And something, again, that I'm very conscious of and talk a lot about with architects here in Australia and New Zealand, the importance of shading, and reminding people that for us, it's all about the northern aspect, facing towards the equator. We want that sun, but we don't want too much of it at the wrong times. But what often trips people up is the westerly shading, and that's common wherever you are, that you really need to be conscious of that late evening sun, particularly at a lower angles. So a lot of architects implementing things like vertical shading, not just shading at the top of a window, but also along the sides, which seems to be effective and also quite trendy, and people are figuring out how to do that with an aesthetic that matches this environment. And it's quite exciting to see that sort of vernacular evolving around passive house for warmer climates. And it's great that we don't have to do that alone. We do have people like Anne doing that in climates like Spain. How about you, Zach?
Well, I was also struck by the emphasis on shading, of course, and the notion that shading is really the sixth principle of passive house. And so I wanted to point people also to an article by Michel Wassouf on the Passive House Accelerator called "The Six Fundamental Principles of Passive House." So Michel is a colleague of Anne's at PEP. He also practices in Spain, and it's a nice kind of creative approach to talking about the six principles. I think people will enjoy it. We'll include a link in show notes.
Which also as you talk about that, reminds me of all the great logos and images that we have on the Passive House 101.
Yes, the infographics. And a reminder to everybody that those are Creative Commons, so those are free for people to use. So there's a little description about that Creative Commons arrangement. But yeah, please check those out, everybody, and use them in your communication if they're helpful to you.
I'm always excited when I see something like that on architects' websites where they have a little page that's dedicated to passive house as a bit of an explainer. And often that can be a bit overwhelming to sort of create all that content, how to write it. So use that for that purpose to grab those. They're fantastic images there that explain in pretty simple terms those principles, and can be really useful as a starter to educate clients about what passive house is. Ilka, were you about to say something then?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to shading as a sixth passive house principle, because I think that's totally something to consider, in particular because energy modeling doesn't always lead you or give you answers for shading. Sure, it helps you figure out your cooling loads and demands, but sometimes the way an energy model works as one big volume, it doesn't really sometimes lead you towards having to use shading on particular orientations. And that's something that I think in the beginning, when you start out as a passive house consultant, is something to be aware of, that there should always be shading implemented, even if the energy model doesn't necessarily tell you to do so.
Mm. And I know that there are amazing resources out there now that you can do sun path tracking on particular sites and really analyze where the sun's going to be throughout the whole year at different times of the day and the intensity of that. So I know that there are great tools here, and there'll be tools wherever people are working that they can access that will assist with that. Great stuff. I guess one thing that also stood out for me right at the start was just the journey of getting into passive house, and we hear this from time to time, that people who become really passionate about passive house and end up, in Anne's case, doing it exclusively for all her work, doesn't necessarily start out that way. It's a bit of a journey to get there, including hearing about passive house for quite a while, and then exploring it, and then realizing that it does align really nicely to some other principles that are really important as well. And I think that's important when we're talking with people who are maybe early on in that journey, just to appreciate that we've had a little while to learn and understand what airtightness means, and that we need to take people along for that journey as well. Hopefully speed it up a little bit, but we do need to appreciate where people are coming from, and not necessarily going to jump in boots and all right at the start.
Right. I mean, that brought that segues into a point that I found surprising, was that she's taught at least 3,000 students in her passive house courses. And she was saying that it's much nicer to teach the 50-year-olds and up, because they've been in their careers for a while, and they really appreciate learning how to do things better. Whereas the younger students, it's harder to really keep their interest in passive house, because they haven't had the experience of doing things one way and realizing, that's not the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So they're not as enthusiastic, which I was really surprised by, because I thought younger people would be like, oh yeah, climate crisis, passive house is a great solution. But it's what you were saying, that maybe you have to do things differently for a while to really appreciate how helpful passive house can be.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Very good. Anything else from anyone?
Yes, the outfit approach to passive house
yes,
retrofits was a great part of this interview, and I wanted to point people to the bonus episode of the podcast that we conducted with Rainer Pfluger back in October of 2021 as part of the 25th International Passive House Conference. And Rainer is a leader in the outfit initiative, and so I had a chance to discuss with him the initiative, and he describes it in more detail. So we'll include a link to that as well in show notes.
And there are also a lot of resources, interviews, articles that Anne has contributed to as well. So if you want to learn more about her work and the things that she's been involved in, all that amazing training that she's done, then she's pretty easy to find. LinkedIn and some other places around the Passive House Accelerator website. Awesome. Hey, thank you, Ilka and Mary, as always, for bringing us another very inspiring woman in the passive house industry. It's always fantastic to hear those stories and those voices. Zach, what have we got coming up?
Well, all the Passive House organizations are firing back up their programming for 2022. So there's a long list of stuff happening in January, February, and we have links to that information in our weekend preview. So I will include a link to that in show notes as well. At the Accelerator, thanks to the work of Mary and her team at the Accelerator, we just released a brand new issue of the Passive House Accelerator magazine. We're super excited about this. It's about climate action from North America to South America. So we're talking about all sorts of different climate zones and different kind of national realities and the challenges and opportunities for Passive House in all of that. So lots of wonderful writing and stories in that issue. So please check that out on our website. Next week for Construction Tech on January 18th for us here in North America. And so that's a Tuesday. It'll be a Wednesday for you, Matthew. We have Abby Muser-Hare and Katie Jones joining us. So Abby is with Precipitate Architecture and Planning, and Katie is a homeowner of this project. It's a passive house straw bale project. So we'll be diving into embodied carbon, natural insulation, and passive house on Construction Tech. And then on Wednesday, our time, Thursday, your time, Matthew, we have the Global Passive House Showcase, which will feature a stunning passive house called Olive Passive House, designed by Alessandro Ronfini of Demo Architects in New York. And this is just I'm looking at the image of this cool project. It's basically just a kind of high design approach to making kind of taking a slice out of a box that turns this kind of very efficient form factor into also a really powerful architectural expression and connection between inside and outside. It's really cool. So that'll be, I think, really inspiring for design-oriented folks and a great exploration of single-family passive house. And then on January 27th, we have episode 4 of the Building Performance Interactive, which is our Ireland and UK based show. So and registration is open now for that. This is going to be an episode about super insulated, airtight passive house homes with timber frame construction, and it will be focused on that practice in the UK and Ireland. So that's awesome. Yeah.
Like I say, a lot going on, people ramping up and playing a bit of catch up as well. I know that there's a few 2021 events have been rescheduled for 2022. So we've got to get all those through as well, including the Passive House, South Pacific Passive House Conference coming up, I think in April this year. Great stuff. Well, good to be back into it. Thank you to all of you, and thank you to our listeners. We'll be back again next week with another interview. So look forward to talking then. Thanks for tuning in. This is the Passive House podcast. Don't forget to tell all your friends about it, share, and give us a rating or review wherever you listen to this. And we'll be back again. Talk to you next week.